Alrighty, good evening, YouTube. 80 here, back with another quick movie review. Hopefully, I'll be able to say a lot of good stuff, because I am talking off the top of my head with, especially with this particular movie. Um, Again, this is one of Singleton's like first and classic films. And I'm gonna try to do the story and then talk about the story, then go on like the back end detail, of some additional facts about the movie that a lot of people probably didn't know. But this is Boys in the Hood, starring Ice Cube, Cuba Gooding Jr., Morris Chestnut, Laurence Fishburne, Neil Long. I'm probably leaving out another name. Regina King is in this, and that's probably like the most famous heavy hitters in this movie. But pretty much this is like one of the origin, hood films. Well, street urban hood crime hood films, if you want to call it that, done by a black director. The next one I think right after this was Menace to Society, and pretty much uh, with this movie is really telling the tale of of someone living in the hood, and with everything that was going on in the early 90s, especially right after the LA riots, how regular people, you know, who aren't even gangbanging, but they're just pretty much a product of their environment and the bystander, how they're living. And indirectly, a good way, the main character played by Trey, oh, and Angela Bassett's in this too, I forgot about her. But the main character, Trey, played by Cuba Gooding Jr., he uh, he pretty much makes it out of the hood, and it says it at the end of the epilogue. But really what this movie is really about, the dumb thing with gang violence and how different sets operate. And I think even at the time in the early 90s, they had like a blood and crip truce. And even I think even to this day, the only time I really hear about gang violence is really not about at least here in Atlanta, not them, killing each other. It's mostly bystanders with guns and crazy people killing each other. There's no gang affiliation that much. Most of that stuff, I'm assuming you hear about it in Chicago and like Detroit, but I haven't heard that many stories recently coming out of there. Well, at least gang related ones coming out of there. There's some other messed up stories, on top of that. But I like how they had, in this movie, how every character was different and how it has some good, existentialist view, and a lot of knowledge dropping, especially with Doughboy's character and Laurence Fishburne. And it was kind of ironic how Doughboy and Lawrence didn't have, or Furious Styles played by Laurence Fishburne, how they didn't have any scenes, because the scene where Lawrence talks about the property value, and he gives the whole history of how this stuff happened. And if you see the movie Panther or know about the Black Panther Party, that's indirectly what he was talking about, of how the government let the drugs and shit come into the bad neighborhoods, indirectly, to drop down the property value, so they can buy it out for cheap, and then sometimes the rich people will move back in there. And they've even done in Atlanta, and I think, well, they're in the Western Atlanta. I think, I don't know what the status of that is now, but I think like right now in Harlem in New York, that's what kind of happened. I think a lot of the rich folks moved back in there. But um, I know I talked about it on the Boondocks. One episode, it was a satire on that. It was the itis episode. It was, yeah, except for drugs, they use food in there, and that's how it became a bad neighborhood, and people became addicts to granddad's food. And it was funny because, like I said, the more and more you watch it and you really dissect it, you really see the mess of reality. If it's a joke or not, or a satirical joke or not, and what you're watching. But it was funny because right after that scene, Ricky, which is Morris Chestnut's character, asked Trey, was his dad used to be a preacher or something. He said, nah, he just reads a lot, and you know reading goes a long way. And Doughboy, when he was talking to him, Doughboy had some good existentialist moments too, because his character went to prison. And most of the things that I hear that these guys do in prison, they read books, they either play cards, or X, Y, and Z, and Big Herc, who was here on YouTube, he spent like 10 years in the federal penitentiary, and he said, yeah, he read a lot of books, a lot of law books, and that's what helped kill the time, and also what possibly put him at peace. But even before he went to prison, he didn't look like a bad dude anyway. He just made one dumb decision, and then boom, you in the pen. But a lot of dudes, and was quoting from Notorious, a lot of dudes who are independent, pretty much a lot of them are philosophers, so I think it was a scene where Doughboy was talking about God, and it was like this whole existentialist and agnostic viewpoint he had, and indirectly it sounded like that what he was saying to me was that God usually doesn't have anything to do with it. It's really man that does shit like this to each other, and we put God on top of it because that's the one hope that we have to go to. But if you really think about it, people do make choices, and it is a cause and effect one way or another, especially today. And like I said, I'm not heavy religious, but at the same time I'm not spiteful either, because what if God is indirectly like one of your big brothers or something like that? And I said it before, he doesn't like to be pimped out. So the best example that I usually give is that for people who are going to school, you study for this, no, you have this big exam and you fail to study, but you walk in on test day expecting a miracle, then you're mad whenever you fail. I was like, well, you got to put in the work. You can't walk up in there expecting a miracle. So that's usually the best example, that I usually use in relation to that. I don't really deny his existence, but I also don't put him on a pedestal like what a lot of religious people do, because, religion in this country is a big, business. So, 9 times out of 10, you have a lot more power in yourself before you ask him. You do all that you can, and then you ask God for that helping hand. But, going back to the movie, how this movie was actually, brought up and going to be made behind the scenes. When John Singleton was at college, I can't remember what college it was, but they had one of the guys from Orion Pictures. I don't know if they're still around, but they did movies like Colors, and they did one of Tupac's last movies. I think it was gang related. It was either gang related or Bullet or Gridlock. It could have been all three, but he was in there talking to them about the film, and John Singleton really didn't like it. He said it was a gang film from the perspective of two white cops, and it's understandable because I don't know who wrote that story or that script, but it sounded like what a white person would do. But I'm still kind of iffy on it, because if you really think about it, if you see the movie, the character in that, one of the veteran gang force police officers played by Robert Duvall, he had a good relation / some informants with some of the gang members of certain sets. One in particular was a multicultural one. I think it was with Mexicans and blacks. He was cool with like some of the OGs there, because a lot of them, they didn't like some of the shit the other gang members were doing, especially with the drive-by shootings, killing each other. And then one of the Crip characters in the movie, he was cool with too. But personally, I saw that film and I didn't really hate it that much, because of course I saw all the Hood films before I saw that one, and that was like the first so-called Hood movie made by potentially a white person that had did that, because at that point you never really see cops and gang members. I think that was like one of the first early movies where they kind of had a decent relationship or / work together. But pretty much one of the representatives or whoever it was had said, well, Ice-T had wrote the songs on it, but John Singleton was like, well, he didn't write the fucking script, and everyone had clapped, which was kind of true. And that was the starting beacon what got John Singleton to write BOYZ N THE HOOD. It told the perspective, from someone living in the hood who wasn't a cop and who wasn't a gang member, but he was a bystander. And another good fact At this time, I think Ice Cube had just left NWA, and I think he was working on this America's Most Wanted album, and him and Singleton, were chit chatting. It was funny because I think he came to him, I think early in the process, and I think he got on him a little bit because he didn't read the script, and then Ice Cube said that he went back and he had read the script finally, and he said, "Yeah, this character Doughboy, that literally is me. The only difference, or I knew dudes just like him, and I can relate heavily." And that's how Ice Cube really got started into doing his thing, and pretty much had got him into writing. So I think like right after he did this movie, or I don't know really what the timeline is because Straight Outta Compton has his own timeline and also what really happened. But I think right after that, that's when he started writing Friday. So but Ice Cube was smart. But like I said, I'll talk more about that when we get to Straight Outta Compton. But uh another behind the scenes thing, this movie and of course the Hughes brothers Menace Society were my two favorite films about the hood, and of course Colors, because like I said, those are three movies that approach the same subject matter, but it had a different perspective, and of course all three had different endings. you know uh with Menace to Society, it was pretty much a little bit of the same story, except the main character was actually really on the deep end of the crime, and at the end he didn't make it out the hood. So for the ones who didn't see it, I'm not going to spoil that. But you know a guy I remember a couple years ago, him and I were having a debate about hood films, and there were even some ones that are underrated on there I'm also going to talk about. But yeah, he said out of all, between the two main ones, between Menace to Society and Boys in the Hood, he and I agree. Menace to Society is the most realistic one. That's the bad statistic that happens here in America, because there are a lot of good kids, or ones that they're about to change their life and they end up getting gunned down. But in the sequence and correlation of that story of how crazy shit can happen in the hood, that one was also the most realistic one. Dude, what happened with him didn't even happen with some gang members. It happened with it was a whole separate thing. But two other hood movies that are also underrated was South Central with Glenn Palmer, and what was the other one I'm thinking of? Fresh, with Samuel Jackson and Nelson T. I can't remember his last name, but one of them, Fresh, was about the 12-year-old drug dealer, a very smart kid, by the way. And then of course South Central, a dad trying to indirectly save his son from the gang life. And depending on the comments on this, if you guys want me to talk about those two, I'll be gladly and happy to, or do a review. But it's just, I love those movies where they have a similar premise, but every single, there are a lot of differences, and another good gang movie that just crossed my mind, Blood Blood In and Blood Out. Again, it's a cult classic, and that one was very slick on how it told its story. You have three different protagonists, and pretty much those movies I just put up there and stated, pretty much most of those characters had three different endings. So and also one of them, who was like the most innocent one, had a very bad tragedy. But I'm jumping around on topic and subject to subject. But another funny fact about this movie, the Crenshaw Mafia didn't like this movie because of how they were portrayed in there. Apparently they had looked weak, but this ain't the first time I heard if you portraying gang members in movies, they wouldn't like it. And even the last movie I did reviewing the Warriors, sometimes you really got to get their permission to shoot in their hood, let alone tell a certain story. That's why when I do eventually or am gonna do gang related storytelling, little bits and pieces, usually I'm definitely gonna try to use a fake gang But really depending on how I feel, if something actually happened that this gang had did, I'm gonna tell that story. I'll risk them trying to, kill me for that. But I'm gonna remain anonymous anyway. But you know, I really, enjoyed this movie when I sat down and watched it again, and took in a lot of the elements, because we really do need to increase the peace. And I even heard that, when this movie had premiered at one of the theaters, it was a shootout outside of the movie, and I was like, that's kind of, messed up. But some people had doubts about this movie. I think it was Ice Cube's first film, and people didn't take it seriously. But when you what NWA had did for hip hop music, this is what, or in the reality of what goes on in the hood, this movie had did the same thing. Because like I said, people didn't take it seriously until they saw it. And of course, a lot of black people, I'm assuming black people at the time, thought it was, glorifying, the gang life because of the title. But it didn't. It showed a sad reality. And you know um it is what it is. One of the most sad part of the movie, where, Ricky and Doughboy's character ends up getting murdered. That they don't show that in the movie. This is right after he buried his brother Ricky, who had got gunned down. And you know, it's really scary and relatable, because the characters of Trey and Ricky, they were the same. They were smart kids. They were friends. They were always hanging out with each other. And both of them were going to excel. One of them potentially was going to, go to college to play football or be a technician. And then he thought about joining the army, and Trey's character had talked him out of it, because that thing is that the black man has no place in the white man's army. And indirectly kind of one of the reasons why I didn't join, but it was an additional reason on top of that. But pretty much how I feel, about Ricky's character, that between the both of them, he was the real shining hope. And it just sucked that he ended up getting shot and dying. And the sad part, even with the dysfunctional family dynamic, at the home, the mom hated Doughboy because technically Ricky was his half brother. They had two different daddies, and even one of the dudes and Doughboy's crew had even said that. And I was like, yeah, this is just a bad situation of a dysfunctional black family, and that's usually, how it is. The baby moms, he's one of the baby daddies, and is going to hate one of the kids that's biological to the baby daddy, and yada, 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 yada. But the last fact I will say about this, the porch crew that was sitting out of, Ricky's house on the porch, those were really supposed to be all the members of NWA. But Ice Cube at the time was the only one that was, willing to do it. And of course, I think he was beefing with, them in particular, so you knew that wasn't going to happen. And it would have been dope, to see all five of them sit up there and, do their scenes. But that's pretty much all I have to say. I think I got everything out that I wanted to say. Again, we flood the comment box. We can always talk about it. And I will talk to you guys later. Peace.